Hello again, everyone. Continuing my first of two New York weeks, I'm going to look at the Brooklyn Nets of the NBA today. Talked about the Knicks yesterday, so we'll talk about the second NBA team in New York, the Brooklyn Nets. Last year, they finished with a 38-44 record, which was able to grab them the number 8 seed in the East, which just proves how weak the Eastern Conference is. You can finish off the season 6 games below 500 and still make the playoffs. So that's definitely not a record that they want to repeat, though, for sure. They want to improve from that. To get a better seed. Just because you were able to make the playoffs with that kind of record this year doesn't mean you're going to be able to do that again next year. And with a record like that, if you were to make the playoffs, it'd probably be an 8th seed, which means your first round is going to be most likely against Cleveland, maybe Chicago, but definitely against an opponent that's probably going to find a way to beat you in 4 or 5 games in the first round, and your playoff appearance won't be that long. So they definitely need to improve. And I think they've brought in some pieces. They've drafted well. In my opinion, I think Hollis Jefferson is a steal at the 23rd pick from this past draft. They also have Chris McCulloch, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, maybe it's McCullough, who was the 29th pick, as well as Juan Pablo Valle, who was the 39th overall pick. All three of them are forwards. Some were of a small forward and a power forward kind of a deal, but definitely guys that I think can play well in this league, especially Hollis Jefferson. Like I said, with the 23rd overall pick, I do think he is a steal there. I don't think he was like a top 10 kind of a pick talent, but definitely a guy that I thought would have gone before the 23rd pick. So I think the Nets found a really good talent there going forward with this team. Looking at their center possession, it's not hard to say who the best player, at least in my opinion, is on this team, that being Brooks Lopez. Last year, 19.8 points per game, 9 boards per game, 0.8 assists. He's definitely a solid center. I would say maybe top 10 center in the league. I'm not going to say top 5 or anything crazy like that, but between the two Lopez brothers, he's definitely by far the better one. The other one, of course, being with the Knicks. But I think he's a very solid center. I think he would be a starting center on most teams in the NBA, and I think most teams would be very content, very happy to have him holding down that center position. Like I said, with his points, you got a guy who can be a 20-10 average guy, bringing that every night, and that's solid to get from your center possession. So I think that position they're solid at. They've brought in Andrea Bargnani, only played 29 games last year, started 22 of those. Being Canadian, obviously I like the Raptors. I was so happy when they got rid of this guy. Maybe he can, find a second, wind or a second stage into his career with the Nets here. He didn't play poorly with the few games he played last year. He averaged 14.8 points per game with 4.4 boards and 1.6 assists, but I don't think he ever really turned out the way the Raptors wanted him to. I don't think he became the star that they thought he was going to, and I don't think he's going to now at all. I think he's been in the league too long. I think he's going to be that 15 points per game guy, maybe 6 or 7 boards. That can be a solid second option at the center/forward position kind of thing. And if you look at that two combination, I think you got 48 minutes in a game. I think Brook Lopez plays 35 to 40 of those, and then Bargnani comes in for 10 to 12 kind of thing. I think that'd be a solid combination pair off for that center position with this team. Looking at the guard possession, you got Jarrett Jack, who I think is a solid player. I liked him when he played for the Raptors. I think he's slightly underrated, maybe, I don't want to say underappreciated, but maybe slightly underrated. Not quite sure he's a starter in this league, but last year he did average 12.3 points per game with 4.1 boards and 4.5 assists, so I think he's a solid guard. I think he's a good guard to have with this team with all those young forwards that they drafted, other young guys they have on this team. I think he's a good veteran to learn from. He's played on successful teams, and I think he's a durable guy. Who can be a solid veteran guard starting for this team. The other guy I'll mention before I get to the rest of the roster is Johnson. Obviously, I think he's their number 2 guy. He averaged 16.5 points per game last year with 7.6 boards and 4.8 assists. So I think those 3 guys, Lopez, Jack, and Johnson, are solid, a solid group that can take this team to probably a 500 record, but not deep into the playoffs. I think, when you look at the East, you have to compete with Cleveland and Chicago. And, Cleveland's got LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, the list goes on and on there. Chicago's got Jimmy Butler and Derrick Rose. Noah, if he can find a way to play through his foot issues. 2 very solid teams there. And even just looking at their division, the Raptors have Lowry and DeRozan. The Celtics have Isaiah Thomas and Jared Sullinger and Amir Johnson and a lot of good players there. The Knicks obviously they have Carmelo Anthony, Porzingis, number 4 overall pick. Flalo, Calderon, some good solid veterans on that team. And then you got the 76ers, who are definitely an up-and-coming team as well, with a lot of young talent there. So the Nets, I'm going to arguably say maybe they're not the, when you look at the Nets and the Knicks, arguably I'm going to say maybe the Knicks are the slightly better team, at least on paper. I think that the Knicks have more talent spread out throughout their roster. I think after the 3 guys I've mentioned with the Nets, with Lopez, Jack, and Johnson, their talent pool just really drops right off. After those 3 guys, and sure, those 3 guys can go out and can probably those 3 guys can combine for 50 points a night. On average, can average 50 points a night for you, no problem. But to be successful in the NBA, you got to find a way to get to 100 points per game, and getting 50 points from the rest of the guys in their roster, not really sure that that's going to happen. Like I said, they brought in Bargnani. I think Ellington, who played for the Lakers, obviously he's going to be happy just going to a team that isn't a basement dweller anymore. And I think with Jack, good veteran guy for him to learn from. Last year he had 10 points per game with 3.2 boards and 1.6 assists. So I think he's a good young guard to bring in. They also have Bogdanovic, who had 10.3 points per game with 3.8 boards and 1.7 assists. Sloan is a guy they've brought in who had 7.4 points per game last year with 3.6 assists. They also got Larkin, who had 6.2 points per game with 3 assists last year. So they got a lot of guys who are young or haven't been in the league that long, and I think can start to turn the corner and turn the Nets into a team that is better than 500. Last guy I'll mention, Young, who had a great year for them last year with 10.5 points per game with 7.1 boards and 2.7 assists. I think he's going to be a solid player as well. The only thing with the Nets, like I said, is after Lopez, Jack, and Johnson, I think their talent pool really drops. I think Hollis Jefferson is a steal, though, in the draft. I think he will be a very big part in this team going forward as we look at the second half of this decade and looking at the Nets going forward. I think he's going to be a very, very important part to this team. I think Brooks Lopez has to play well for this team. If he gets hurt or if he doesn't perform well, the Nets are going to have a hard time making the playoffs, and I think they already got a hard time, or going to have a hard time making the playoffs again. Like I said, 38-44 is not a very solid record. I think if they could find a way to get to 45 wins, again, I always try to say with a team that is struggling or had a below 500 record, or a team like the Knicks who didn't even get to 20 wins last year, I like to try to stay positive and look at a way that this team can get better, but be realistic about it. The Knicks aren't going to go from 17-65 and draft Porzingis and bring in Aflalo and go to 65-17. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But if they can get to 25-30 wins for the Knicks, that's perfect, going in the right direction. And that's how I look at it with the Nets. If they can find a way to get to 44-38, even if they just flip their record, maybe get a 6 or 7 seed, get into the playoffs. If you do have to play the Cavs or the Bulls in the first round, and as long as you don't get swept, if you can compete with them, maybe take it to 6 or 7 games. Or upset them and get to the second round would be obviously the best outcome for that situation. But I think that's the mindset you got to have as the Nets. Is we have some solid players. We got this Hollis Jefferson guy who, in my opinion, is a steal at 23. Hopefully he'll develop well and be a good player for us. Let's get to 45 wins. Show that we're heading in the right direction, and then hopefully you can be a place that top free agents are going to look at coming to play in. Obviously, the Nets and the Knicks, being in New York, are a big basketball market. If Brooks Lopez plays well, I think he's a center that many players would love to play with. He's still got a lot of years left in him, like I said, and can be a 2010 guy for sure, no problem. And if this Hollis Jefferson kid's plays well and he's a good young talent that gets a lot of hype and makes Nets fans excited to see what he can do, then that's going to be another bonus and a plus for this team as well. Those are my thoughts on the Nets, though. Good luck to them this upcoming year. I will be continuing New York week tomorrow with my look at the Giants of the NFL. And so those are my thoughts on the Nets. You can follow me on Twitter at GHAM614. And like I said, I'll be back tomorrow switching over to the NFL. Look at the Giants. Thank you again all for the support. I really do appreciate it. And have a good day. Bye-bye.